Oh my God, there's so much heated stuff happening in the Alec Baldwin trial, but we're not here to talk about Alec Baldwin. We're here to talk about Karen Read. I posted a video a couple days ago about how the defense, they had people reaching out to them, either people who knew the jurors or were coworkers of the jurors or were the jurors themselves. I think it was a total of 4 of them that said, well, Karen Read was actually acquitted of second-degree murder and the third charge, which was leaving the scene. Now, if you guys remember, Karen Read initially was charged with second-degree murder. The second one was manslaughter. And then the third one was leaving the crime scene. And in the defense's motion to, dismiss, because, they don't want Karen Read to be tried again, they said that like, oh, technically she was already acquitted. But y'all remember, the judge declared a mistrial and it was kind of abrupt. But when I say abrupt, I don't mean like, oh, we didn't know that the jury was deadlocked for X amount of hours. It was more like, oh, mistrial, shoot, that's it. Okay, I guess it is a mistrial. Okay. Now, Jackson and Yannetti, they said that the jury voted 12-0, all unanimous, that Karen Read was not guilty of second-degree murder. And like I said, the third charge, leaving the crime scene. It seems like they may have been stuck on the manslaughter part. We don't know what part of the manslaughter part that they're stuck on, because remember, in manslaughter, there were 2 lesser charges that were included. It was involuntary manslaughter. And then the other lesson included, if you didn't find her guilty of manslaughter, then you would look at involuntary manslaughter. If you found her not guilty of involuntary manslaughter, then you would move on to motor vehicle homicide. So we don't know where within those lesser included charges, or if it was the superior charge that they were deciding between. I think in the defense's motion, it seems like it was like a half-half divide split. And then it eventually moved to 8 thinking that she was guilty and then 4 not guilty. But I don't know where in those charges they were debating that. But yeah, very important stuff. So remember, the defense in their motion, they said, oh, well, the judge declared a mistrial and we didn't even have a chance to explain our side. We didn't have a chance to fight it. We didn't have a chance to figure out, where the jury was stuck on. I do remember this, though, when I was trying to figure out what happens if there's a deadlock. Is there going to be a mandatory polling? I think I remember in Massachusetts that, there is no polling, I guess, if there's a mistrial. However, if there is a verdict reached, that is when, you can request to do a polling to make sure that all 12 jurors unanimously agree. So now let's get to reading Mr. Lally's response to the state's motion to dismiss. And oh boy. As we are reading his response, and I think Mr. Lally probably does better in writing his responses than he does speaking in trial, because I read his motions before. They're like, okay. But as I'm reading this, I'm going to pull up some footages from the trial from the trial or like during deliberations and all that stuff, just so we can have our minds refreshed, because I think that really helps a lot. That's what I did before I started this video. I was like, okay, I want to see what the judge said when she was giving the instructions. Were they clear? If I was in the juror's shoes, would I also have been like, okay, well, we are in a deadlock and that's it? Or would I have been like, well, actually, we agreed on count 1 and 3. Count 2 is the one where we're stuck on. But I know, just listen to, when we get to the footages, I want to know what you guys think of this. But let's start with Mr. Lally's motion. So Commonwealth's opposition to defendant's post-trial motion to dismiss. Now comes the Commonwealth in opposition to defendant's post-trial motion to dismiss her indictments for second-degree murder and leaving the scene after causing death. So that's charge 1 and 3. As the defendant's motion and premise upon hearsay, conjecture, and legally inappropriate reliance as to the substance of jury deliberations. I don't know, this is just so interesting to me. Because although we have people who were on the jury that are coming on saying, hey, we actually voted this, but there's no legal recording of that, because they didn't do the polling. And like I said, it didn't seem like polling is a necessary thing, or it's something that they do if it's a mistrial declared. But, oh gosh, okay, I have a lot to say, but I'm going to try to keep it nice and tight. But you guys know I'm going to probably stray a little bit. Because there's no recording of it, it's like, what happens if a bunch of juries say that this happened and then a bunch of others are like, no, it didn't happen this way? What do you do then? Or let's say they all did agree, saying they're like, yeah, we did all agree unanimously in counts 1 and 3, but it's like, can you keep can you take their word for it? What if they've been influenced afterwards? I don't know. These are the things that I think about, because to me, it seems like, well, they don't have a reason to lie. Why would they lie about this? Why would they come out and lie about this? But who knows? Maybe they went home, they were influenced. I don't know. It's just one of those things that I, will consider. I'm not saying it happened here, but I just feel like because there's no recording of it, like, oh, what do you do from there? I guess I don't know. I think the best next steps would just be maybe have a hearing and then talk to all the jurors. But I don't know if that's appropriate or not. Anyways, getting back to Mr. Lally. Further, contrary to the defendant's claims throughout jury deliberations, the defendant was given a full opportunity to be heard. The jury's communication to the court explicitly indicated a full impasse on all charges. I don't know if I agree with that. I mean, my impression, I just assumed that they were on impasse on all the charges, because it seemed like they were in a stark divide. What I didn't realize was that, they could have just been on a stark divide on just one of the charges, but they agreed on the others. But my impression, and I think a lot of people's impression, was that it seems like they were fucked from all three charges. Like, they just couldn't agree, and it was just all over the place, maybe half or something like that. Mr. Lally said the defendant was given a full opportunity to be heard. I do remember the judge giving the chance to the state and to the defense to respond. However, after giving the Tui Rodriguez charge, basically kind of like pushing them a little bit, like, hey, consider each other's sides, like, you guys can do this. And they came back and gave the note. I know that she read the note, and then she was like, okay, well, I won't do that to you guys. Let's do I declare mistrial. And that was about it. No one really stood up to say anything. I didn't see anything coming from the defense. Like, they were like, hey, I want to say something, or same thing with the state. It just seems like, okay, it's a mistrial. That's about it. But anyways, I think Lally was saying that, like, maybe the defense, they should have said something then, I guess, possibly. But I disagree with Lally, though, because now that I'm looking in retrospect, so when Lally says the jury's communication to the court explicitly indicated an impasse on all charges, now that I'm looking in retrospect, I'm like, I'm actually not quite sure. But we'll go to the jury's notes and see what you guys think now. But during that time, it seemed like they were impasse on all three of them. That's what I thought. The jury's communication to the court explicitly indicated impasse on all charges. The court carefully considered alternatives before declaring a mistrial. The defendant's unsubstantiated but sensational post-trial claim that the jury reached a unanimous decision to quit lacks any merit or legal foundation. Whew, that is pretty strong, because I'm assuming maybe the state hasn't reached out to the people who were serving on the jury and asked them if anything happened. I don't know. That's a strong statement to be making, Mr. Lally. I don't know if he's even talked to any of them or if anyone even reached out to him. But I want to go back to Judge Beverly Cannoni's instruction to the jury. Was it confusing? Was it clear cut? If you guys were in the jury's shoes during that time, would you guys also have written similar notes that you would have written to the judge? So let's go and watch that really quick. Man, I am fired out about this, because there's some crazy stuff that's happening. And I didn't do a live stream for this because I wanted to hop onto Elden Ring to play some games, but we'll see what happens. I don't think I have time today anymore.
Return tomorrow morning. Don't tell anyone, including me, how the jury stands.
Sorry. I was listening at 2 times speed. I'm going to do normal speed, because that's the speed the judge was speaking at when she was talking to the jurors.
Return tomorrow morning. Don't tell anyone, including me, how the jury stands numerically or otherwise on the questions before such time as you have reached a unanimous verdict. You are going to notice shortly that the court officers are going to take an oath, and you will hear from that.
So when you hear that, my takeaway would be, once you've unanimously agreed on all the charges, then we shouldn't tell the judge where we stand, and we wouldn't be filling the verdict form slip. That's how I would have taken it. But then now that I'm looking in retrospect, it's like, could you have also creatively in your mind thought, hey, if there's a unanimous verdict, right? Or a unanimous agreement on one of the charges and then the other charges, would that be something you would report back to the judge? I don't know. If I was the jury, I guess I wouldn't either. But the fact that this is what the defense says, right? The fact that they all allegedly agreed unanimously on the second-degree murder and the third charge, that would seem pretty big enough to want to tell the judge. But I don't know, based on this, my assumption would have just been what the jury did.
that they too, as well as all other persons, are forbidden to communicate in any way or manner with any member of this jury on any subject touching on the merits of this case. Remember that the decision of the jury must be unanimous, and the foreperson should be certain that each member of the jury is in complete agreement with the verdict. After the final vote of the jury, the foreperson should check the appropriate boxes as to each charge, then sign and date the verdict slips and notify the court officer that you have reached a unanimous verdict. You will then be brought back into the courtroom where the foreperson will deliver the verdicts to the court. I'm going to seek counsel before we reduce your number to...
See, I wanted to hear verdicts, plural. Because this is where I'm going to start getting really nitpicky. And of course, this is all in retrospect, right? But it seems like you can kind of look at it both ways, that your unanimous decision on the verdict. So maybe like, verdict being, okay, we all unanimously agreed on count 1. That's a verdict. We all unanimously agreed on count 2. That's a verdict. We all unanimously agreed on count 3. That's a verdict. So those are 3 verdicts right there, verdicts. But, oh my gosh. It is kind of confusing. And I feel like this is something that's, it's one of those things where, yes, you can say they're like, oh, the attorneys, they should have thought of this, they should have thought of that. But I mean, who knew that this was going to happen? I actually don't know. This is crazy to me. I mean, I'm so glad that we're watching all these trials, because it's cool to see all these very interesting and unique scenarios unravel in front of us right now. So I don't know. I mean, if I was a jury, my assumption would be, okay, we'll have to agree on all 3 of them. And then from then on, we sign the verdict form and then we give it to the judge. But we cannot sign the verdict form unless everything has been unanimously agreed to. That would be my assumption. Now, if you guys remember in the defense's motion, they did mention that some of the people in the jury felt a little bit weird that after the mistrial was declared, they're like, wait, hold on, that's it? And then they felt probably perturbed that, well, we actually unanimously agreed that, she wasn't guilty of second-degree murder. That's probably like the biggest one to them, the second-degree murder one. And that's the reason why they wanted to reach out to the defense. On June 9, 2022, the defendant was indicated by a Norfolk grand jury for second-degree murder in violation of 1, manslaughter while operating under the influence, leaving the scene of personal injury/death in violation. 2, the way this is written kind of confused the crap out of me. So second-degree murder, manslaughter, and then leaving the scene. On April 16, 2024, a 10-week jury trial commenced by Beverly Cannoni, the judge. I'd be messing up her name all the time. The jury began their deliberations on June 25, 2024. In addition to the 3 indictments, the jury was instructed to consider 2 lesser included offenses to manslaughter while operating under the influence, involuntary manslaughter, and then motor vehicle homicide. I don't know if I went over this in the beginning of the video already, but I'm just going to go over it again, just in case if I haven't. So we had charge 1, second-degree murder. Charge 2, manslaughter while operating a motor vehicle under influence of liquor. However, within manslaughter, there were 2 lesser included. So if you found that she was, maybe the state didn't prove beyond a reasonable doubt that she was guilty of the charge 2 manslaughter, you can then go on to the lesser included, which was involuntary manslaughter. And if you found that the state didn't prove their case there, then you can move on to the next lesser included, which was motor vehicle homicide. Now, I don't know if you guys remember, but that was when Jackson and the judge were kind of like duking out after trial ended, because Jackson wanted to indicate on the jury instruction for the second charge that, like, hey, if they found her not guilty of manslaughter, I want there to be a not guilty check mark next to it. And then if they found her not guilty of the next charge, I want a not guilty check mark next to it. Because I think initially on the form it was guilty, guilty, guilty. And you would only check it if it's guilty. However, you found her not guilty, you would just leave it blank, which I don't like that either. I'm like, no. I think it's good to indicate not guilty on there. And Jackson was like, it's almost as if the court was directing the jury to vote guilty, which I'm like, but for me, it's more like, I like things to be clear, straight to the point, and I want there to be 2 check boxes. So at some point, after the they're kind of like arguing back and forth. The judge got Mr. Yannetti into it, and after the judge had some time to think about it, she was like, okay, fine, I'll change the form. And that was when she addressed the jurors, because jurors gave a note to the judge saying that they want to have the search report, which was the search and rescue report, and the judge was like, no, that's not part of evidence. But anyways, I just want to talk about that really quickly. All right, back to Mr. Lally. The defendant's motion states that the court's decision to declare a mistrial was sudden, brief, unexpected, neither preceded nor accompanied by a decision with counsel. Yet, the defendant's motion and supporting affidavits of counsel inexplicably omit the full opportunity the defendant was given to be heard and the defense consent to the mistrial. So let's go back to Let's go back to day 34. I think day 34 is where it starts. Okay, so the jury, they start deliberating on day 31. Day 32, kind of quiet. Day 33, kind of quiet. Or sorry, they did ask for the cert report. Now let's go to day 34. This is the first time we've heard about the jury possibly being in a deadlock. Do y'all miss the fan? The fan is back.
You are unmuted.
Thank you. Sequence session.
We're back on the record on 22-117, the Commonwealth versus Karen Reed.
Okay. All right. So, counsel, you're aware of our note from the jury. Dear Judge Cannoni, I am writing to inform you on behalf of the jury that despite our exhaustive review of the evidence and our diligent consideration of all disputed evidence, we have been unable to reach a unanimous verdict. Signed.
So, unanimous verdict. Because now I'm thinking, well, it seems like in that note, they were unable to reach a unanimous verdict on any of the charges. I don't know. That's how I took it as. And I think that's what the judge interpreted as. I think that's what the defense team interpreted as, the state, and probably you guys as well. Unless, maybe you guys didn't. Let me know if you didn't.
By the foreperson. So I want to hear from counsel your view on whether there has been due and thorough deliberation. So let's start with the Commonwealth.
My answer would be no, Your Honor. This simply hasn't been sufficient time yet.
And what does the defense say?
And at this point, they had been deliberating for, oh boy, I got the number here somewhere. They were deliberating for, was it like 18 hours, I think? Yes, they have been deliberating for 18 hours.
We believe that there has been sufficient.
All right, so I'll hear from both of you in more detail. Mr. Lally, I will hear you.
Your Honor, the jury received this case just earlier this week. They've had slightly shortened days, and I'm not in any way, shape, or form suggesting that they haven't conducted their due diligence in regard to their deliberative process, but I would submit that it is far, far, far too early in their deliberative process to even consider giving them any kind of Tui Rodriguez instruction or anything close to that. Furthermore, what the note doesn't really indicate affirmatively that they can't come to a conclusion. It just says that they haven't come to a conclusion through their deliberative process at this time. So they're not even asking for one, is what I would say.
All right, thank you. Mr.
Yep, so the Lally wants them to continue deliberating.
I'll hear you.
Your Honor, I would disagree with Mr. Lally's characterization of the note. The word exhaustive is the word I think that's operative here. They're communicating to the court that they've exhausted all manner of compromise, all manner of persuasion, and they're at an impasse. This is a
Judge, are you even listening to his argument?
A case where the jury has the legal instructions. They've only really asked one question, which was to try to get a report that they were not allowed to get. And I think the message has been received that the evidence is closed. They won't get anything more. They've been working essentially nonstop over the last 3-4 days. We're approaching the weekend. They didn't come back with this at 3 o'clock or 4.
I mean, it seems to me that a mistrial for the defense is a win for them because, they can either wait and try the case again when the state, will recharge. But by that time, by that time, the FBI investigation, maybe the conclusions will be released and maybe that'll be more favorable to Karen Reed.
4 o'clock. They're at 12 o'clock and they have nowhere to turn. So our position is the jury should be read the Tui Rodriguez model instruction and go from there.
Okay. All right. So you all know that it is within my discretion, I decide. So a case that has been, it's a long case. This is our 4th day of deliberations, but Tuesday was a short afternoon, maybe 2.5 hours. Wednesday, they left early because of an appointment. Yesterday was also shortened a little bit, and this note arrived with less than 3 hours of deliberations today. So the length of the trial, the length of the deliberations, I know the case we heard from 74 witnesses. There are 657 exhibits, very complex issues in this case. I'm not prepared to find that there have been due and thorough deliberations at this point. So I'm going to send them back out. We'll bring them in and we'll do.
So the judge is going to send them back, have them deliberate. And at this point, she's not going to give them the Tui Rodriguez charge, but kind of like urges them to, hey, reconsider each other's like positions. Don't just come with a verdict just to come with a verdict, but like maybe just like rethink it. Like just give them a little push and shove and be like, oh, hey, you guys are the best people to decide this. You guys got this. So this is the first time when we get the note from the jury and they're like, we're like stuck. The term they used was exhausted, and Yannetti was like, yeah, I think we should just end it there, do the mistrial thing. To do the Tui Rodriguez, beginning on Friday, June 28, 2024, at approximately 12:15 p.m., the jury sent a note stating, I am writing to inform you on behalf of the jury that despite our exhaustive review of the evidence and our diligent consideration of all disputed evidence, we have been unable to reach a unanimous verdict. At the time, the court requested argument from the Commonwealth and the defendants to whether the jury had engaged in due and thorough deliberation. The Commonwealth responded the jury had not had sufficient time to deliberate and requested the jury be instructed to continue the deliberations. On the contrary, Attorney Yannetti argued, we believe that there has been sufficient time, and advocated the jury to be declared deadlocked and provided the Tui Rodriguez instruction. Attorney Yannetti stated, the word exhaustive is the word that I think is operative here. They're communicating to the court that they're exhausted all manner of compromise, all manner of persuasion, and they're at an impasse. This is a case where the jury has a legal instruction. They've only really asked one question, which was try to get a report that they were not allowed to get. And I think the message has been received that evidence is closed and they won't be getting any more. They've been working essentially nonstop over the last 3-4 days. We're approaching a weekend. They didn't come back with this at 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock. They're at 12 o'clock and they have nowhere to turn. So our position is to the jury, it should be read the Tui Rodriguez model instruction and go from there. The instruction is for situations where after due deliberation, the jury has expressed that they are at an impasse. The Tui Rodriguez certain has a certain sting to it. A Tui Rodriguez instruction should not be employed prematurely or indiscriminately. The court ruled that given the length of the trial, number of exhibits, and complex issues on the case, they had not been due and thorough deliberations and instructed the jury to continue deliberating. Now, on Monday, July 1st, so what happens then? At this point, it's been the next day. The jury has been deliberating for about 23 hours. Now, what I thought was interesting was that the day before was when they gave notes to the judge saying that, they were stuck. And I think the judge asked them, hey, do you guys want to go home early today? And the jury's like, no, we want to deliberate for another 30 more minutes. Just give us 30 more minutes. I'm like, oh, okay. Like, maybe we're getting close here. Maybe this was at the part where they were able to convince 2 people to come over to their side in regards to the charge to manslaughter.
You are unmuted.
We're back on the record on the Karen Reed, Your Honor. We've got a question from the jury.
All right. So, Mr. Lally, I'd like to hear from the Commonwealth first about due and thorough deliberations.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the last one.
I'd like to hear from the Commonwealth first about your view on whether the jury has conducted due and thorough deliberations.
Your Honor, while I understand that they have been at this for a while, I would submit that they have not, and I would ask the court not to make such a finding. Reasons for that, Your Honor, this jury heard, I believe, about 29 days or so of testimony, 657 different exhibits marked as evidence, 74 different witnesses who testified before them. And while I believe they've been out for somewhere in the vicinity of 22 or 23 hours, what I would submit to the court based on all of that, as well as the complexity of the issues presented to them, they really haven't even had 1 hour of deliberation equivalent to 1 day of testimony, to each of the days of testimony that they've heard. So while they have been at it for a while, I would submit that based on the evidence and testimony of witnesses and the complexity of issues in this case, I would submit that they have not done a thorough deliberation up to this point.
Mr. Yannetti?
Our view is that it's time for Tui Rodriguez. They've come back now twice, indicating essentially that they're hopelessly deadlocked. The content of this latest message is that they have been over all the evidence. Previous message said they did an exhaustive review. This time they said that they have fundamental disagreements about what the evidence means, and it's a matter of opinion. It's not a matter of lack of understanding. This court, when you sent the jury out, encouraged them not to take a straw vote, encouraged them to go over all the evidence in a very methodical manner. I think all indications are that they've done that, and this is what Tui Rodriguez is for. We asked the court to get it.
Yeah. All right. I think this has been an extraordinary jury. I've never seen a note like this reporting to be at an impasse. I do find that they're now, with the additional time that they went out without coming back Friday saying that they were deadlocked, is due in thorough deliberation. So I'm going to give Tui Rodriguez. So are they ready to come in?
And that's what she does. She gives them the Tui Rodriguez charge just to give them a little bit of a push. Back to Mr. Lally. On Monday, July 1st, 2024, at approximately 10:45 a.m., the jury sent another note to the court stating, Judge Cannoni, despite our commitment to the jury duty entrusted in us, we find ourselves deeply divided by fundamental differences in our opinions and state of mind. The divergence in our views are not rooted in the lack of understanding or effort, but deeply held convictions that each of us carry, ultimately leading to a point where the consensus is unattainable. We recognize the weight of this admission and the implication it holds. So, the fourth person writing this note, I wanted to have like a legal background. Very well written. Following receipt of the note, the judge again inquired of the Commonwealth and the defendant as to whether there has been due and thorough deliberation. The Commonwealth argued that although the jury had been deliberating for about 22 hours, given the length of the trial and number of witnesses, the jury had yet to engage in thorough deliberation. Sorry, I realize that sometimes when I read these, I read them a little too fast, so I'm trying to slow it down a bit. But if I still read it a little too fast, or if you think it's too slow, you can speed it up or slow it down on the YouTube system. Attorney Yannetti again sought a Tui Rodriguez instruction stating that the jury has come back twice, indicating essentially that they're hopelessly deadlocked. They said they've been over all the evidence. At this time, they say they have fundamental disagreements about what the evidence means. It's a matter of opinion. It's not a matter of lack of understanding. The court found that at this point, the jury had engaged in due and thorough deliberation, noting that this has been an extraordinary jury. The court indicated it had never seen a note like this reporting to be at an impasse. At approximately 11 a.m. on July 1st, 2024, the jury was advised of the full Tui Rodriguez instruction, including that it was the jury's duty to decide the case if you can do this so conscientiously, and that there's no reason to believe another jury would be more competent to decide the case. However, on July 1st, 2024, at approximately 2:30 p.m., and I'm not going to play the video because we don't need it. Well, actually, I'll play the part where the judge declares the mistrial. But here's what the note says. The jury sent a final note to the court stating, despite our rigorous efforts, we continue to find ourselves at an impasse. Our perspectives on the case or on the evidence are starkly divided. Some members of the jury firmly believe that the evidence surpasses the burden of proof, establishing the elements of the charges beyond reasonable doubt. Conversely, others find the evidence fails to meet this standard and does not sufficiently establish necessary elements of the charges. The deep division is not due to a lack of effort or diligence, but rather sincere adherence to our individual principles and moral convictions. To continue to deliberate would be futile, and will only serve us to compromise these deeply held beliefs. The following receipt of that note, the court discharged the jury, declared a mistrial. So after she read the note, I remember her saying, and we won't do that to you. So we're going to send you home, and she declared the mistrial. Now, when I read the notes that was written by the jury, and even reading it right now, it seems like they weren't even close. Now, in retrospect, it seems like they weren't even close on maybe the second charge, but it seems like they weren't close on any of the charges. That's how I viewed it as. But I don't know. What do you guys think? So let's go to the part where the judge declares a mistrial, and how do we feel about it now in retrospect? 26 hours of deliberation now.
Our evidence fails. I'll be in to see you. Private. Continue to deliberate would be futile and only serve to force us to compromise these deeply held beliefs. I'm not going to do that to you folks. Your service is complete. I'm declaring a mistrial in this case. I'll be in to see you privately in a few minutes. So thank you so much for your service. Okay.
All right, so court, please.
And I mean, that's it. I mean, Yannetti, Jackson, I mean, they are very strong personality people. They didn't say anything. And it seems like from what Yannetti had been arguing whenever the note came in, it seems like they wanted the mistrial to just be declared. It seems like, I don't know if they really wanted further inquiry. Maybe they wanted further inquiry, but they didn't want to say anything to the judge. But I feel like they would have just chimed in and said something anyways, right? Because the defense said like, well, we didn't have a chance to respond. The judge just declared a mistrial and that's about it. But I don't know, based on like all the notes, their reaction to the notes, it seems like they just want a mistrial and move on from there. Of course, now in retrospect, when you find out that like, oh, snap, like she was acquitted on murder, second degree murder, and acquitted on the third charge, like, oh, okay, like that's, shoot, maybe we should have like really pushed and figure out what the jury was indecisive about. But I don't know if they're allowed to do that, right? I don't know if you're undecided, if you're not unanimously decided on all the charges, and then you had to fill out the verdict form, are you able to find out, okay, like what was the poll for each of the charges and all that stuff? Like, I don't know. It seems like no, but oh boy. All right. So let's go back to Mr. Adam Lally. So I read the note already. Mistrial declared. The representations made in counsel's affidavits have no legal bearing on the mistrial, as the jury did not reach any verdicts, partial or otherwise. Juvenile v. Commonwealth. Verdicts must be reported in open court. The only verdict which can be received or regarded as a complete and valid verdict of a jury. So again, Lally's going to cite all these case law, and he's going to tell us, how they do things in Massachusetts. Oh God, I want to hear the defense's reaction to this. I want to read their. What am I trying to say? I want to read their response to this motion, but I wonder if they're just going to wait to maybe July 22 hearing, because they're supposed to go there for an like a status update, or if they're just going to reply right away. Oh gosh, I love reading these replies. Okay, so Lally says the only verdict which can be received and regarded as complete and valid verdict of a jury upon which a judgment can be rendered is an open and public verdict given in and assented to in open court as a unanimous act of the jury and affirmed and entered as of record. See, that's what I was wondering too. I was like, oh, but like, because this wasn't recorded, does it really count as an acquittal? But this might be a guidance to the state because, remember, to me, they hastily said, oh, we're going to try Karen Read. Yeah, we're going to try her again. Maybe this time it'll just be, this will give them an indication like, oh, maybe we should just go after her for manslaughter. But whatever. Also see Commonwealth v. Tobin. The verdict which determines the rights of the parties and is admitted record and upon which judgment is rendered is the verdict received from the lips of the foreman in open court. It is not enough to show that a jury may have agreed on some issues at some time. If that limited showing were to control, uncertainties would be invited. No error in the judge's refusal to accept the not guilty verdict slips found in the jury deliberation room after the jury was discharged. Were those slips in contradiction of the jury's report to the judge in open court that they were deadlocked? The hearsay comments and juror statements about what really happened are legally irrelevant as the jury failed to reach any verdicts. See Bluford versus Arkansas. And I remember Bluford, this is what the defense cited in their argument. In Bluford, the jury sent a note to the court indicating they were hopelessly deadlocked, and the court asked a foreperson to disclose the jury's vote on 3 charges: first-degree murder, manslaughter, and negligent homicide. The foreperson reported the jury unanimously agreed that the defendant was not guilty of murder, but they were deadlocked on manslaughter. Okay, sounds similar here. And had not voted on negligent homicide. The court gave the jury an Allen instruction akin to the Tui Rodriguez instruction that emphasized the importance of reaching a verdict and instructed the jury to continue deliberations. Allen v. United States. After half an hour, the jury reported that they have not reached a verdict and a mistrial was declared. Interesting. Okay, so this one, they unanimously agreed that the defendant was not guilty of murder. So similar to what happened with Karen Read, assuming the defendant's motion is correct and what the juror said was correct. But they were deadlocked on manslaughter, which seems to be what happened in the Karen Read trial as well. The United States Supreme Court rebuffed the defendant's claim that the jury acquitted him of murder. This seems very similar, as the foreperson's report was not a final verdict because the jury had to continue to deliberate and, more importantly, gave no indication that they were still unanimous on the murder charge. The United States Supreme Court emphasized that when jurors engage in discussions about the circumstances of the crime, it often causes one to rethink their stance on a greater offense and revisit a prior vote. Oh, okay. So they're saying that it's possible that, like, okay, if you said not guilty, 12 people unanimously voted not guilty on murder, but then they couldn't agree on manslaughter, maybe murder would have been something that they would have reconsidered and possibly agreed on. The very object of the jury system, after all, is to secure unanimity by a comparison of views and by arguments among the jurors themselves. A single juror's change of mind is all it takes to require the jury to reconsider the greater offense. Tui-Rodriguez instruction is designed to urge the jury to reach a verdict by giving a more serious consideration to opposing. I think I'm watching too much Judge Canody, her and her accent, to opposing points of view. It must be recognized as a practical matter that jury votes on included offenses may be the result of temporary compromise in an effort to reach unanimity. A jury should not be precluded from reconsidering a previous vote on any issue, and the weight of final adjudication should not be given to the jury action that is not returning a final verdict. So it's possible that maybe the reason why they all agreed on, not guilty on second-degree manslaughter is because they were hoping to maybe compromise and do, okay, fine, we'll do, manslaughter instead, but then there was disagreements within that. So I think that is what Mr. Lally is arguing here. Oral confirmation of guilt or acquittal in open court is the only evidence the court can receive of free and unanimous. Okay. Free and unanimous. Animus is like when you have like animosity, right? Assent of the jury to the verdict. The jury's note were unambiguous that the jurors were deeply divided by fundamental differences in our opinions and state of mind that resulted in a starkly divided jury as to the charges. Emphasis on plural. That's what I was looking for too. I was looking for plurals and like verdicts, charges, but that was me just starting to be really nitpicky. The jury consistently indicated that their impasse was not due to a lack of understanding of the law or the charges, but a profound divergence in deeply held convictions, ultimately leading to a point where consensus is unattainable. The jury's notes did not indicate agreement or acquittal on any of the charges. Rather, it was evident that the jury was unable to agree on any charges due to their sincere adherence to their individual principles and moral convictions. I want to hear more from other jury members. Contrary to representations made in the defendant's motion and supporting affidavits, the defendant advocated for and consented to a mistrial, as she had adequate opportunities to object and instead remained silent, which removes any double jeopardy bar to retrial. Consent to a mistrial may be inferred from silence where a defendant had the opportunity to object and failed to do so. Daniels v. Commonwealth, where defense counsel told judge he believed jury was at an impasse in deliberations that had no objections to a judge declaring a mistrial. Such consent removed any double jeopardy bar to a retrial. Pellegrin v. Commonwealth. Despite having an adequate opportunity to object, defense counsel remained silent. Proper to infer from counsel's conduct that the defendant consented to a mistrial. Also see Commonwealth v. Curtis. The manifest necessity test has no application in situations where, as here, the defendant requested or effectively consented to a mistrial. During her opportunities to be heard on June 28 and July 1st, at no time did any of the defendant's three counsels, who's the third counsel? Oh, Elizabeth Little, request inquiry as to what charge or charges the jury was deadlocked on. Because I was wondering, are they allowed to ask that? Rather, the defendant was quick to request a Tui-Rodriguez instruction at first opportunity, indicating belief based on clear and obvious language of the jury's note. As stated by Attorney Yannetti, the jury was hopelessly deadlocked and had exhausted all manner of compromise and was engaged in fundamental disagreements of what evidence means. It's a matter of opinion, not a matter of understanding. Counsel's request for a Tui-Rodriguez instruction permits the inference that both parties were provided an opportunity to be heard on possible alternatives to a trial. Also see Commonwealth v. Pereira. The timing of a Tui-Rodriguez charge is committed to the discretion of the trial judge. Once a Tui-Rodriguez instruction is given, the jury could not be sent out again to continue deliberation without their consent. Furthermore, following the discharge of the jury, the court engaged the Commonwealth and defendant in discussions about choosing a status date for scheduling a retrial. That did happen. At no time during that hearing did the defendant object or indicate displeasure with the mistrial. I do agree with that part. The mistrial was also supported by the manifest necessity, jury deadlock. See Commonwealth v. Bryan. In considering whether to declare a mistrial or over a defendant's objection, the court must give counsel a full opportunity to be heard and careful consideration to alternatives to a mistrial. A frequent and traditional example of manifest necessity to declare a mistrial is where the jury was discharged because they were unable to come to an agreement on a verdict. Thames v. Commonwealth. Mistrial warranted where jury reported inability to reach a decision after 4.5 hours of deliberation. during which jury twice sent judge messages about impasse and judge inquired about jury's ability to reach agreement, describing hung jury as a prototypical example of manifest necessity. Also see a juvenile. Mistrial warranted where jury reported deadlock on fourth day of deliberations after judge inquired about ability to reach a verdict. The trial judge is best situated to determine whether the ends of substantial justice cannot be attained without discontinuing the trial. Commonwealth v. Cassidy, citing Gorey v. United States. In declaring a mistrial premised upon the trial judge's belief that the jury is unable to reach a verdict, that decision is treated with greater deference because otherwise there would be a danger the judge would employ coercive means to break the apparent deadlock. Fuentes v. Commonwealth. Commonwealth v. Ross. Deadlock juries are particularly susceptible to coercion. Cruz v. Commonwealth. The term manifest necessity is another way of saying, in a particular case, the right of a defendant must yield to that of a public. Trial judge interacts directly with jurors and is in the best position to determine whether the jury is deadlocked. The court engaged in considerable efforts and sent the jury back to deliberate 2 times, following notes that they were at an impasse, in addition to finding that the jury had engaged in due and thorough deliberation and providing the Tui Rodriguez instruction at the request of the defendant and to her satisfaction. During deliberations, the court amended the verdict slips to clearly depict the lesser included offenses and provided the jury supplemental instruction on how to consider lesser included offenses. So again, that was the clarification that Jackson wanted for the second charge, which was manslaughter. So again, if you didn't find her guilty of manslaughter, you would move on to involuntary manslaughter and then something homicide. C. Bluford. The United States Supreme Court has never required a trial court before declaring a mistrial because of a hung jury to consider any particular means of breaking the impasse, let alone to consider giving the jury new options for a verdict. Defendants claim that the jury should have inquired of the jury holds no merit, as nothing in our case law or in required the judge to make either inquiry, whether there was reasonable probability of any unanimous verdicts or if the jury would consent to further deliberations. We're almost done. As a matter of course, the circumstances before the judge did not necessitate other inquiry. The final note from the foreperson unequivocally stated that the jury were unable to come to a unanimous decision. In other words, that the jury was deadlocked. The note did not suggest, for example, that the jury was merely having trouble making decision or needed further instruction from the judge. Given the 4 days of deliberations, the jury's indication that they carefully reviewed all the evidence, that their divergent opinions were premised upon deeply held moral convictions, and the court was left with no reasonable alternative other than to declare a mistrial. Further consultation with counsel would not have produced any fruitful alternatives, nor was there a reasonable probability that the jury would have consented to deliberate further, particularly when the jury wrote to continue to deliberate would be futile, only served to force us to compromise these deeply held beliefs. So Lally is saying that because the judge, was under her discretion to do the Tui Rodriguez charge, at that point, give him a little bit push. But when they came out with that final note, and that final note was very well written, at that point, the judge doesn't have the ability to force them to deliberate without their consent. So she wouldn't be able to do that anyways. And it seems like from how the note was written, it seems like, there's no point in them deliberating any further because nothing's going to change. So Lally is standing by that. And Lally's saying that, even if the defense, even if they objected or even if they wanted to argue something, it wouldn't matter anyways, because we can't send the jury back to deliberate. And then we also, yeah, that's what I'm trying to say. Okay. But, oh gosh, I don't know. But if I was Karen Reed and I found out that the jury all agreed that I was not guilty of, especially the second degree murder one, it's like, oh God, I don't want to be charged with this again. I don't want to go through this again. Anyways, moreover, whether counsel initiates contact with the discharged juror by first sending notice to the opposing party with the substance of proposed communication, or if the juror initiates contact with the counsel as alleged in the defendant's motion, counsel may communicate with jurors only about permissible subjects. C. Permissible subjects include counsel's performance during the trial, extraneous influence on the jury's deliberation, or a juror's bias towards the defendant. See Commonwealth v. McCowan. Neither extraneous influence nor a claim of juror bias is alleged by the defendant to have been an issue. See Commonwealth v. McGallop. Even in circumstances where jury testimony is needed to ascertain whether there is racial or ethnic bias or extrajudicial influence, a judge may not inquire into the jury's subjective thought process, content of deliberation, or reasons for concluding guilt or acquittal. Rather, what the defendant's motion is entirely premised upon and what is expressly prohibited inquiry is that the jury's deliberative processes and the substance of the jury's deliberation. Okay, so he's saying that's not allowed. I want to hear the state's response on that. Commonwealth v. Moore, the secrecy of jury deliberation has served as a bedrock of our judicial system, and inquiry into the jury's deliberative processes would intrude improperly into the jury's function. The common law principle that is essential to the freedom and independence of jury deliberation, that their discussion in the jury room should be kept secret and inviolable, was not, and arguably could not be overruled by the adoption of rule, it is improper for counsel to inquire with jurors or through intermediaries, the individual or collective thought process of the jury, the reasons for their decision, or the substance of their deliberations. Massachusetts continued to adhere to common law principles barring inquiry into the contents of jury deliberations and any impeachment of jury verdicts based on information gained from such inappropriate inquiry. Similarly, it would be improper for the court to inquire through affidavits or evidentiary hearing the substance of jury deliberation. Okay, that's what I'm wondering. I'm like, can we go to the next step where we have a hearing about this? If after communicating with the juror, the attorney wishes to secure an affidavit from a juror, as such affidavit must focus on extraneous influences and not the substance of the jury deliberation or the individual or collective thought processes of the jury or the jury as a whole. Cassidy. Trial judge acted within discretion to declare mistrial where proposed inquiry deliberating juror could not be made without inquiring into the deliberative process of the jury. The Supreme Court, Judicial Court, has instructed that whenever a judge asks individual jurors about the possibility of extraneous influences on jury deliberations, whether of jurors who are still sitting as such or jurors have been discharged, the purpose of the individual voir dire is not to delve into the jury's deliberation. There should not be an inquiry into the jury's individual or the jury's collective thought processes. Commonwealth v. Blanchard. Likewise, polling the jury on the various possible verdicts during deliberations or after discharge would constitute an unwarranted or unwise intrusion into the province of the jury, and the Supreme Judicial Court has cautioned strongly against the risk of coercion inherent to questioning jurors, particularly in individual colloquies. Can I skip over this? I'm going to skip over this. Similarly, even if deadlock does pertain to some distinction between the various levels of offense, the judge has no way of knowing whether the jury had in fact fully considered the offense as charged. A design to extract information from a deadlock jury does not solve the significant problem in doing so. A court's inquiry into possible verdicts improperly intrudes on the jury's function, and the ostensible benefits to be gained, by such a procedure are outweighed by its risk. For the foregoing reasons, the defendant's motion should be denied, as there was no verdict that acquits the defendant, no grounds for the court or counsel to inquire into the deliberative process of the discharged jury, the defendant consented to a mistrial, and the court properly declared a mistrial due to a deadlocked jury who was at an impasse due to their, quotation marks, starkly divided perspectives on the evidence and their sincere adherence, to individual principles and moral convictions. As such, retrial is not barred by double jeopardy or constitutional principles, and the Commonwealth may retry the defendant on the 3 indictments and any appropriate lesser included offenses. But do you want to, though? Do you want to? Signed by Michael Morrissey, Adam Lally, Laura McLaughlin. That was today. Oh, boy. What do you guys think? Do you guys think that the jury instruction to the judge was confusing? Do you think that it's possible? I don't know, if you were on the jury and you knew that you possibly agreed on, because I think Lally does make a good point, and I feel like I really say that, but I think Lally does make a good point though. The fact that maybe they did initially agree on the, unanimous decision on the murder was because maybe, manslaughter was something that was going to be like a compromise. Because that compromise didn't happen, maybe some people would have went back to, thinking, it was murder. I mean, I have a hard time believing that because, we watched the case and I don't think they were close to even touching. I don't think the state was even close to touching that they proved beyond a reasonable doubt that it was second degree murder. But yeah, I don't know. My impression from the notes, it seems like they were just fucked. They were fucked. They were deadlocked. And I shouldn't say the F word that much in this video. But it seemed like they were just stuck and they were just screwed on all the charges. Not just like, oh, okay, like we agreed on 2 to 3, but we're stuck on 3. But yeah, we'll see how Karen Reed and her defense team, how they respond. Again, in about 10 days, on July 22nd, they're going to have like a status hearing because, they're going to try to retry the case and see what's up with that and figure out scheduling. But I don't know, man. I mean, it's Mr. Lally. Are you really gonna go after Karen Reed for second degree murder? I don't know. I wonder if other jury members are gonna come out and speak about this to either maybe agree that like, hey, we were no question, no doubt that we all agreed no second degree murder, not a compromise. We just didn't agree on it, right? Or we just agreed on it. So yeah, that's it for today. Okay, if you guys haven't already, I made a video about Alexi Treviso, just an update on that one, because there was a pretty major thing happening with Alexi Treviso. Again, that's the 19-year-old cheerleader who went to the hospital and then subsequently gave birth, but the baby was found in a trash bin, discarded. So when I rewatched the body cam footages, when I reread stuff about that case, I don't know, man. It's just super fucking sad, especially watching the interviews of all the hospital staff. Super, super sad. But something major happened in that. So definitely check out that video if you guys haven't already. And yeah, thanks for joining me. I hope you guys have a good and wonderful weekend. Take care of yourselves. Definitely, I'm still watching Alec Baldwin. So the Alec Baldwin stuff is crazy. But I think on Monday, rumors, apparently Hannah Reid was supposed to testify today, but they had to send the jury home super early because there were some issues that were coming up. And the jury was sent home, and I don't know, maybe she'll testify on Monday, but maybe if she does testify, maybe she'll just go up there and plead the fifth, and we won't really get too much from her, but I do want to hear from her. Okay, before I go, though, I want to know, why would it be advantageous for Baldwin and his defense attorneys to push that it was Seth Kenney that provided the live ammunition and not Hannah? I don't get why they're, like, fighting so hard about that. I get, like, the reason why it's advantageous that, Troy Teskey came to the police office after the trial happened in Hannah Reid and was like, oh, hey, these are actually, the ammunition. And, that's important for discovery for the defense. Like, I can see, like, that's a huge fucking issue, and that's why they want to do the mistrial. But I was very confused why it was advantageous, other than that, why it was advantageous for Baldwin to say that it was Seth Kenney. I don't know. Maybe I'm missing something. I'm probably missing something. You guys tell me. All right, have a good one. Take care. Join the Discord if you haven't already, and have a good weekend. Bye, y'all.